calendar, which includes the super mayor's birthday, because you can't forget that. She could be for all of this result, given that her salary for the two jobs is nearly $300,000. More than the state's governor, by the way. But it's all on the taxpayer side. And this goes beyond signage and merch. Henyard put an ordinance in place that if she lost a future mayoral election, the next mayor's salary would be dropped from $200,000.
But the corruption didn't end with financial mismanagement. Investigators also uncovered evidence of gross abuse within the Dalton Police Department, where officers under Henyard's leadership were receiving overtime pay at absurdly inflated rates. One officer, whose base salary for the fiscal year was $87,200, somehow managed to accumulate an additional $114,000 to $800 in overtime pay, an amount that defied all logic. Another officer, with a salary of $73,500, racked up an inexplicable $12,230 in overtime during the same period. These payouts were so excessive that they pointed to a deliberate scheme, one that suggested Henyard had been manipulating payroll and rewarding certain individuals for their loyalty. The deeper Lightfoot dug, the more it became clear that Henyard had built an empire of corruption, fueled by greed and protected by those in positions of power. Her ability to manipulate the system and evade accountability for so long raised serious questions. How had she been able to hold on to power despite the growing number of red flags? The answer soon became apparent. Henyard had powerful allies, possibly even within the town's board of trustees. These allies had worked behind the scenes to shield her from scrutiny, ensuring that any attempts to hold her accountable were thwarted before they gained traction. Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Henyard remained free, continuing to enjoy the protection of her political enablers. This only added to the frustration and outrage among Dalton's residents, who had suffered the consequences of her actions for far too long. But one thing had changed. The truth was now out in the open. Henyard's corruption had been exposed, and the people of Dalton were no longer willing to stay silent. The community was at a breaking point, united in their demand for justice. They had lost faith in their leadership, betrayed by the very officials who were supposed to protect them. But they were determined not to let Henyard walk away unscathed. With Lightfoot's investigation shining a spotlight on her crimes, the pressure was mounting. The people of Dalton would not rest until Henyard was held accountable. The road to justice would be long and difficult, but one thing was certain: the reckoning had begun. The residents of Dalton had been deceived, robbed, and silenced for too long, but no more. They were ready to take their town back, and no amount of corruption or political protection would stop them. Tiffany Henyard's days of evading justice were numbered. The people of Dalton had finally reached their breaking point, with Tiffany Henyard's blatant attempts to obstruct the investigation into her corrupt practices. After months of frustration, desperation led them to seek outside help. They turned to Lori Lightfoot, the former mayor of Chicago, known for her strong leadership and sharp investigative skills. Lightfoot wasted no time in delving into the case, and it wasn't long before a trove of damning evidence surfaced, exposing Henyard's involvement in a wide array of illegal activities. The findings were so severe that it became evident Henyard was facing serious jail time. Yet despite the overwhelming evidence against her, she remained free, shielded by a network of powerful allies who continued to protect her from justice. As Lightfoot assumed her role as the special investigator, the full scale of Henyard's criminal behavior came to light. What initially seemed like a case of financial mismanagement quickly morphed into something far darker, an elaborate scheme of deception, fraud, and reckless abuse of power that devastated the residents of Dalton. One of the most alarming discoveries was the town's rapidly depleting general fund. When the investigation began, Dalton's fund balance stood at $5.6 million, a sum that should have been more than sufficient to support the town's needs. However, by May 2024, that balance had plummeted to just $3.65 million, a staggering loss of nearly $2 million in a short span. This drastic financial decline was just the tip of the iceberg. Lightfoot's team soon uncovered a series of suspicious credit card transactions linked directly to Henyard, revealing a disturbing pattern of misusing public funds for personal indulgence. Instead of allocating taxpayer money to improve the community, Henyard treated Dalton's treasury as her personal bank account. Among the many egregious purchases, one stood out as particularly shocking. On January 5, 2023, Henyard spent an astonishing $33,000 on Amazon. The items purchased had no clear connection to any legitimate town expenses. And that was just the beginning. On the same day, she racked up two more exorbitant charges, one for $4,750 and another from Wayfair for nearly $7,000. Her reckless spending didn't stop there. Henyard lavished $2,200 at Best Buy and a jaw-dropping $12,988 on international vacations, all on the taxpayer's dime. The scale of Henyard's extravagance was beyond belief. While hardworking residents of Dalton struggled to make ends meet, she was living in luxury, funding her lifestyle with public money. Lightfoot's findings not only exposed Henyard's reckless financial habits, but also highlighted the devastating consequences of her actions. The very people who should have benefited from these funds were left with nothing, while Henyard acted as if the money supply was endless. As the investigation deepened, even more disturbing revelations came to light. One of the most shocking was the discovery that as of June 18, 2024, at least 589 checks, totaling more than $6 million, had been authorized and printed but never delivered to the vendors they were meant for. These vendors, who had provided crucial goods and services to the town, were left unpaid while Henyard retained the money for herself, using it to finance her personal luxuries. This blatant act of theft was a massive betrayal of trust and a slap in the face to the community she had sworn to serve. The full extent of Tiffany Henyard's financial misconduct left the residents of Dalton in a state of disbelief. The sense of betrayal was undeniable. People had entrusted her with their hard-earned tax dollars, only to discover that she had squandered those funds to fuel her own lavish and reckless lifestyle. Outrage boiled over, and the demand for justice grew louder. One trustee of Dalton even spoke out on Fox News, expressing deep frustration and calling for swift prosecution. "I suspected all along that Tiffany needed to be locked up and made an example of," the trustee declared, his voice thick with anger. "She cannot just go free. The federal authorities are not letting Tiffany get away with using our money and spending it however she pleases, as if her job included a cash register." The community was adamant. They wanted justice. They expected federal authorities to make an example of Henyard, proving that corruption would not be tolerated, no matter who was involved. As the Board of Trustees grappled with the fallout of her actions, it became evident that the walls were closing in on Henyard. Recently, she was served with two separate subpoenas, signaling an intensifying investigation. To many, this was a clear indication that authorities were tightening the noose around her. The FBI moved swiftly, freezing Henyard's bank accounts and taking steps to seize her assets, a strong indication that a major arrest was imminent. The second subpoena revealed the sheer scope of the investigation, demanding a vast range of records, including personnel files, wage and tax records, time and attendance logs, contracts, checks written to cash, and documents related to Henyard's numerous business ventures. These ventures included a restaurant, a property management company, a charity under her name, and even a political action committee. Authorities sought a complete financial trail, requesting payroll records,